excited to talk about a documentary that brings awareness to the world. I myself learned a lot in missing in Brooks County. Now you both are producers, directors, and you filmed together. What attracted both of you to work on this project together? And we can start with you, Lisa.
Sure. Well, I'm based in Tucson, Arizona. I teach at the University of Arizona. So I actually live 70 miles north of the border, and migrant deaths are something you hear about in Southern Arizona all the time. So this is not a new topic for me, but the situation in Texas is actually very different from that in Arizona. And I think Jeff and I were really interested in exploring it. And of course, every time we went to Brooks County, it just got more, complicated and sort of a more intense kind of story than we had initially thought we were going to tell. And it just became very clear we wanted to make this film.
Yeah, we actually had heard a little story on the radio, a documentary about Lori Baker at Baylor University, who was doing the exhumations that you see Kate Spradley doing in the film. And I mean, I was really moved by the story. So was Lisa. We had this similar reactions. Like Lisa said, she's not only lives in a border city, but she's lived in Mexico. I have a sister-in-law from Mexico. So we reached out to Lori. She invited us out to Texas, and she took us down to this place called Falfurrias. And we said, okay, so can you show us the border? She said, oh, no. This isn't even a border county. Brooks County is 70 miles from the border, but this is where the problem is. And I think that was the moment when Lisa and I realized this was probably going to be something different than, a short portrait of a scientist at Baylor University. And in fact, it turned into a 4-year endeavor to document what's happening in Brooks County.
That's unbelievable. When you always hear about this issue, immigrants dying trying to cross the border, you're thinking in middle of crossing the border, not within already part of like Texas. So that's a huge eye-opening. How did it feel to walk through these areas where so many bodies are found?
No, I think when we first started filming, you're just learning about the situation, you're meeting people, you're forming relationships. And then each time we went back, I think the reality of the situation hit harder and harder to the point where, by the time we were, 3 or 4 years in, you become angry. You just become angry about this, that this is happening. This is our country, our government is doing this. And I feel like the other people working around this issue, like, for example, Kate Spradley, who is a forensic scientist who's featured in the film, I think she also had a similar journey with this. It's like, first you're just trying to do your work, you're trying to learn, and then the more you know, the more what you didn't know.
How did it feel like in this case, knowing that there are all these bodies that were out there, and like Dr. Bradley said, anywhere you see a patch of grass, but with missing grass, you have to think.
Right, and that's the situation in the cemeteries, and that was just really one cemetery. Kate Spradley is hoping to do really all the cemeteries eventually in South Texas and locate and identify every anonymously buried migrant in South Texas, which is, I mean, there's no good record keeping, as you saw in the film. So I think it's very frustrating for her and her team because they don't have maps. Nobody seemed to have the respect for the border crossers that were buried, that were deceased. They didn't take DNA, so there was no chance of identifying them. And then a lot of times they didn't even keep track of where they were burying them. So I think it's a really frustrating, and I think it's probably a lifelong mission that Kate will be on.
And we got to see this room where she's in there, and there's all these stacks of boxes of remaining empty bodies. In this case, it's mainly just bones, but still, with they every single one of those, like narrated, it's someone's daughter, son, father, mother, etc. What was it like to be in there?
I mean, in some ways, it's nothing compared to spending time with the Roma. Really getting to know family that's featured in our film. Having meals with them, spending time with them. Just getting to know them as a family, as individuals. That's the thing that's hardest, is to picture them, living with this for their lives until they find a mother, which they may never. Hopefully they will, but they still are looking for their brother. So yeah, it's the boxes are one thing. Hard to just even get your head around it, really. But actually knowing a family that's been through this, that really, you can really connect with that.
You can follow, a couple of families. You have the family looking for Juan. You have the family looking for the brother from the Roman family. And do we know any updates on either one of the one that remained open? Found for him?
Yeah, well, so with regards to the Roman family and the missing person, Omero Roman, has not been located in any way. His remains. The family is plans to go back to Brooks County, back to Falfurrias, do some more searching, and get with Kate Bradley and Eddie Canales and see if they can maybe cover some different areas. The thing that's very difficult in a place like Brooks County or South Texas in general is that the borderlands are actually private, most of them, unlike in the other border states, California, New Mexico, Arizona. The Texas ranches are privately held, so access is an issue. A lot of ranchers, they just don't want anybody, not even Border Patrol or law enforcement, on their land, so it's very difficult to search those areas.
Yes, you did cover that, and it's interesting because you showed both sides. You also showed one that's like so anti having anybody in his property. What was it like getting that side of the story?
Are you You may be referring to the veterinarian, Mike Vickers, who was the vigilante. He and his group were somewhat welcoming of Lisa and I and the media, but also somewhat suspicious. It took us, I think, about 3 years of sort of nagging him to get invited out on one of their nighttime operations. And I think we ended up going on 2 of those. Is that right, Lisa? I think, yeah, we did 2.
2.5.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he hasn't seen the film yet. It'll be interesting to see what his reaction is, but I have a feeling he's probably going to feel that we did his point of view justice because that's his worldview. He's going to probably watch it and say, yeah, you represented the way I think and the way I believe pretty accurately.
We're actually going to Texas next week to do a tour with the film. We're going to start in Houston and have screenings throughout Texas and end in Brooks County. So the big Brooks County screening will be the last day of the tour. And hopefully people will show up despite COVID. It'll be COVID safe with masks and all. But yeah, we are finally going to be premiering it in Brooks County next week, 2 weeks from now.
I have to admit, I got a little riled up when he was like, the Mexican peasants. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of painful. I'm Mexican. My parents brought me when I was 7. I just got naturalized earlier this year. That's why I still have my little flag, because I'm proud of it. This country took me in since I was 7. But that was kind of mean.
Yeah. And, we could have included more of some of what he said, which we felt was even worse, but we really didn't want to go too far with it. We felt like, you know, a little bit of this is enough really to get the point across in terms of his language and his point of view.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. I was all riled up. My boyfriend was with me and he was like, whoa, like you are really upset. And I was like, I am upset. It just kind of, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you hope these viewers are going to take away from watching the film?
Well, you know, we tried to make a 360-degree portrait of the place of Brooks County and what's happening there. We wanted to treat the audience as intelligent and capable of making up their own minds. At the same time, in order to do that, in order to know and decide what kind of country and what kind of border policies you want to have, you really need to see, you need to witness what's going on. And that was the idea. We felt that if people, and particular lawmakers, could meet the families of the missing, that they would feel differently about the policies that they're creating. So I hope that that's what people take away, is sort of the impact, that first of all, that this is deliberate. This situation was created by policy, and that this may not be a humane way to administer our borders.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people working in advocacy right now in immigration, you know, get a little frustrated that people say, oh, I didn't know this was happening. We had this VIP sort of screening for people working on this issue a few months ago, and that was a comment that someone made, and I completely understand. I mean, people have been working on this for decades, and they're tired of hearing that people don't know that this is going on. So, you know, this film can be a part of educating the public. It'll be on Independent Lens, which is a PBS series, on January 31st in 2022. So a little while from now, but it's coming up, and we're hoping that millions of people see this film and become angry and outraged at what's happening, and really, you know, call their elected officials and speak their, you know, mind about, you know, what they feel we need to do about this. And you know, this has been going on since the early, you know, to mid 90s. Like, this isn't a new thing. This has been happening for a very, very long time.
And before finalizing, we should talk a little bit about Eddie Canales, which is the South Texas Human Rights Center person that deals with it, takes all the phone calls. I mean, it looks like he's there like pretty much almost 24/7. He's there like after hours, taking calls and trying to help people.
Yes, he sleeps there sometimes, and often it's just him, and he's the only humanitarian aid that's actually based there in Falfurrias in Brooks County. And he certainly is always looking for support. So if somebody's moved by the stories in this film, and you want to do something, that's something you could do, would be to support his efforts. Because putting the water out in the desert, I mean, the water does get used, it does save lives.
Yeah, that was actually pretty interesting, and how someone would go out there and steal these jugs, steal these cans of, it's just water. Like, it doesn't hurt anybody. I myself hope that some of the people from Latin America watch this film and do not encourage their family members to try to cross the border, to not try to make this attempt, because they're risking their life.
Or at least become educated about it and know the risks, and, you know, be prepared for it. I think sometimes, well, I don't know. I mean, even Juan, who was, you know, a very young guy who dies. We learn about his story in the film. You know, he was a young, healthy, you know, teenager. He wasn't, you know, like the rest of us. You know, he could deal with this journey. But, you know, Texas in the summer, it's hot. It's very humid, and there's no water around. And then they drink this contaminated water and get sick, and then they become dehydrated. So I think the education part is really important. People have reasons to come. You know, there's no way around that. But I think having more information is important. And you know, maybe there's another way. I mean, and there's certainly another way our government can deal with this.
You know, sometimes, I mean, this was a bipartisan created tragedy. So the hope is that maybe somehow there could be a bipartisan solution. And, you know, a couple things that you probably could say to people who might be on the right of the political spectrum to appeal to their thinking about the border would be, first of all, you know, smuggling has become a major revenue source for the cartels, which is a security problem. So if you know, and it's these border policies that have created the smuggling industry. So if you regularize and, you know, migration, you can cut off that revenue stream to the cartels. And also, if you regularize it and make it a little safer and controlled, you can inspect people. You can know who's coming across at least, which I think is important to a lot of people. But the situation we have now is we have no idea who's coming across because they've been driven into these inhospitable and remote areas. And of course, nobody deserves to die alone in the desert for essentially a trespassing crime. So that's the humanitarian side of it. But there's a lot of security concerns as well.
And you know, the other thing is that, I mean, we filmed in Texas. This is true of other states like Arizona and California, but you know, Texas is booming. You know, the cities in Texas are growing, and they're able to grow because they have people doing labor there, building roads, building buildings. There's a lot of immigrant labor in Texas, and there's a lot that's needed. And that's, you know, one of the great things about, you know, what's happening in Texas. And so it's really ironic that that they're met with this hostility because, you know, immigrants, because they really are helping build that state and build our country. And it really, I think the way we think about immigration needs to change. Just erase it all and let's start again, because this is just not it's not right.
Indeed. We do bring some good. Well, thank you so much for your time and good luck in Texas.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks for watching the film.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.